Current account versus capital account. India imported iPhones from USA. In return, India paid money to USA. So the trade ended there. It is a part of current account. India supplied services. In return, India got back money. That is a part of current account. Okay, so the two-way transfer, the thing happened, ended there and then. Right? It is not kept pending for future. Suppose a company of USA invested in India, right? But invested in suppose it purchased a factory in India. So did the factory go back to USA? No, factory is still in India, right? When we purchased iPhone, money went there and iPhone came here. In case of factory, factory did not go back. Factory is an asset which will remain in India. Although its ownership changed, but the factory will remain in India. That is a capital account. That such transactions are part of capital account. Okay, money is invested in some capital like FDI. Money that comes through FDI is a part of capital account. Okay, and whatever trade is happening, that trade is a part of current account. So that is a broad difference. So when you include both the things, current account and the capital account, you will get balance of payments. So in current account, whether you are trading some goods like merchandise exports. So merchandise export and import means things that you can touch and feel, goods. Okay, so that is your trade in goods. Next is services. So trade in services is trade in invisibles like tourism or profit from the assets. Okay, so tourism is a part of services trade, services export. For example, let us say a person from USA came to India as a tourist. In India, he took some services, he will spend money in India. The money he spends in India is in return for some services that Indians are providing some services to an American national, right? And we are getting money in return. So such a thing is also export. It is an export of services. Although this export is happening within India, but still it is export because an Indian is supplying some service to a US national. Okay, so that is a export in services. Next is transfer payments. So in transfer payment also, suppose from USA, someone, your friend, your family member sends you money to India. In future, you don't have to return it, right? It is a part of transfer payment or capital or current account. In capital account, I'm clarifying this again. In capital account, when a company from USA invested in India, it did not get back anything in return immediately. It only got the ownership. The factory did not fly away to USA, right? Nothing came back. In future, this company can sell this factory and get back the money. In future, it can do that thing, right? So that is a part of your capital account. A capital is being created in India or capital transfer happened. Okay, so you understood the difference between capital account and current account. Now, one thing that is given in your NCERT is that can a country have trade deficit and current account surplus? Deficit in trade account. This is your trade account. Okay, trade in goods is your trade account. Here there is deficit means you are exporting less and you are importing more. India is importing more. India is importing more, but we are exporting less things. So we will have a trade deficit. And current account surplus. Our current account is in surplus. Is it possible? Yes. If we are supplying more services, if we are getting more transfer payments, then our current account will be in surplus. But our trade deficit may be there. We may have a trade deficit. So both things can happen simultaneously. Now see the previous year question of 2013 and 2014. In 2013, UPSC asked which of the following constitute capital account? This one. This capital account. Okay. So capital account is 1, 2 and 4. See, remittances are a part of current account, right? There is no future liability. When a person sends you money as a grant, as a gift, you don't have to return it back in future, right? So that is a part of current account. So remittances will not be there, and you can see option 3 is in 3 parts, is in 3 options. Okay, so therefore 1, 2 and 4 is correct. Foreign loans. So when India takes a loan, we will have to return it in the future. So that is a part of capital account. FDI, I explained. Portfolio investment. A company of USA invests in a company listed on Bombay Stock Exchange. This company gets some ownership of this company. Right? So obviously that is a part of capital account, because in future this company can sell its stake here and get back the money. So that is a part of capital account. Next year UPSC asked about current account. So answer will be 1 and 3, balance of trade and balance of invisibles. This is balance of trade and this is balance of invisibles like services. So these are part of your current account. And what about foreign assets? No. When company of USA purchased this factory in India, then this became assets of that country. So foreign assets are a part of capital account. Similarly, special drawing rights, this we will see later, that SDR are part of forex reserves of RBI. These are assets held by RBI and these assets are part of capital account. Question is about current account, right? Another question of 2006. Here he is saying that it is better to see balance of payment than the balance of trade. Why? He is saying it is better to see balance of payment than balance of trade. Yes, balance of trade is a very narrow concept. Balance of trade ignores the balance from trade of invisibles. So balance of payment is a better thing because India exports substantial services also, right? So reason is correct. Balance of payment takes into account exchange of both visible and invisible items, whereas balance of trade does not. It looks only at the merchandise goods. The news was that India has a trade deficit with 9 of 10 commerce partners. What is trade deficit? This, trade in goods. So with our top 10 commerce partners, we have trade deficit with 9. Which is the one which with whom we have trade surplus? That is USA. To USA we export more and we import less. Okay. So India's top trading partner. In the last financial year, China again became India's top trading partner. Before that, for 2 years it was USA, and before that it was China again. Okay. Now it can also come as a question that what is India's share in global exports? The approximate figure is 1.7. Whatever exports are happening globally, each country is exporting something, right? So what is their share in this global export market? India's share in goods export, merchandise export, is only 1.7%. For services export, our share is 3.4%, right? Now when we import and export, we may incur a current account surplus or current account deficit. India almost always has a current account deficit. India almost always have a current account deficit. But India has lots of FDI inflows, therefore we have capital account surplus generally. Okay. Now here the economic survey says that it is likely that after 17 years India will see current account surplus. So ideally it should be a thing to cheer up. It should be a good thing, na? That we are having current account surplus. But it is not a good news. What is the reason? Reason is our imports fell much more than our exports. Assume a very simple scenario. These are India's exports and these are India's imports. India imports more, exports less. Now let us say, okay, just a minute. These are our exports. Okay. Now obviously every year there is some variation. In import also there will be some variations every year. Now when we had this lockdown and economic disruption, our imports fell, right? Our exports also fell, but exports fell less and imports fell more. Therefore our exports became more than imports. Hence we have a current account surplus. It is a very simplistic scenario. Now the thing is, why is it not a good sign? The thing is that our demand fell. Why did our imports fell down? Our imports fell down because our demand fell. See, this is India. This is some other country. Okay. You are a consumer here. You are consuming some things from a factory of India and some things from a factory of the other country. You don't have money. Your consumption fell. So you will purchase less from Indian factory. Since you are purchasing less from Indian factory, there is less production of goods in India. Therefore, our GDP fell down. Since you don't have money, you are also importing less. Therefore, our imports fell so much. Right? What about our exports? A consumer a consumer in this country consumed some things from his own factory and he consumed some things from our factories. Okay, we exported these things. His income did not fell so much, so he continued to import from India. Therefore, our exports did not fell so much. Our export, this red line, our exports did not fell so much. So this is a cause of worry. Current account surplus, the reason why current account surplus happened in India is a cause of worry because this shows that the domestic demand fell down and other countries' domestic demand did not fell down so much. Okay. And India has a trade surplus with USA, Bangladesh, Nepal. To these countries we export more, import less, which is a good thing. However, with China, Iraq, Saudi Arabia and many other countries, we import more. We have a trade deficit. Now suppose you cannot remember so much information. Still you can solve questions using your common sense. For example, in the year 2020, the first statement of the question was, value of Indo-Sri Lanka trade has consistently increased in the last decade. Whenever anything happens, it happens, ups and downs are there. There may be an overall increase, but these ups and downs are always there, and he's asking for the last decade, last 10 years. Do you think it is possible in the last 10 years trade consistently increased? I don't think so. In fact, Sri Lanka is not such a big country also that we will have some continuous increase in trade. Very important country or something like that, right? So first option will be wrong. This you can assume. If you don't have any data, you don't know anything, you can assume that 10 years is a long enough time for things to consistently increase. Okay. Second statement is, textile and textile articles constitute an important item of trade between India and Bangladesh. Yes, he is not saying that it is the largest item of trade. It is simply saying that India trades with Bangladesh and one of those articles is textile articles, which is okay, which is quite possible, right? There's nothing to be scared of, or you can think that anything fishy is here. No, it's an important item. That's it. So second statement is definitely correct. Third is, in the last 5 years, Nepal has been the largest trading partner of India in South Asia. No, Nepal is not a big country. See, India does most of its trade with big countries. Here is a big country, India. Here is a big country, let us say USA. Here is a big country, China. When there are big countries, all three are big countries. Big country means production and consumption both are big. India produces, China also produces so much, USA produces so much. When USA produces so many things, then Indians have a lot of consumption demand. So India will import many things from USA, from China. Similarly, there's lots of demand, lots of consumption in USA and China. So they will also consume things from our factories. So when the economy's size is big, right, it is a common sense thing, no? When the size of the economy is big, international trade will be more. If there are two small island nations, these small island nations may not have much trade in them. There may not be enough factories, there may not be enough population to import things, right? So just think that bigger the countries, bigger the trade. This is common sense we can think of, right? Now see this sentence, Nepal. How can Nepal be the largest trading partner? It has to be Bangladesh. Bangladesh economy, you must have read in many articles also, it is growing very fast and it is otherwise also a good economy as compared to Nepal. Nepal does not have much industries also, right? So Bangladesh does many exports as well, right? So third sentence will be wrong. So by common sense you can think that 1 and 3 are wrong and 2 is correct. Surplus balance of payment helps build forex reserves. Surplus balance of payment, that is, you have surplus of capital and current account either individually or both. Main thing is that your exports are more. See, these are some goods. We export the goods. In return, we get the money. We get the dollars. Similarly, we import. Suppose we are importing less. So we will have to give less dollars. When we import something, we have to make the payment. So when we are importing less, we have to pay less. So when our exports are more, we are exporting more things, we will earn the dollars. When we earn the dollars, our forex reserves will increase. Okay. Now look at this question of 2013. Which of the following are part of India's foreign exchange reserves? The foreign currency assets like dollars, okay, gold with the RBI, and special drawing rights. We will see what these are. Right. Now, forex reserves of India. So basically this question can come again. Forex reserves of India consist of the foreign currency assets like dollars and the bonds held by RBI of US Fed. 92% of India's forex reserves are formed by foreign currency assets. 6% of our forex reserves are formed by the gold. So when the value of the gold increases, then the forex reserves of RBI will automatically increase. Special drawing rights, we will see what these are. And reserve tranche position. So reserve tranche position is something that is available with IMF. For emergency use, we can use this thing. Okay, details are again not important, just remember the word. Like last year also I told you that reserve tranche position is there something with IMF. So same thing came this year question also. Okay, just remember that reserve, this tranche word is related to credit system granted by IMF to its members. Okay, size of India's forex reserves is at all-time high of $590 billion. China's forex reserves are much higher at $3.3 trillion. Now what are special drawing rights? When we import and export, we need dollars. Suppose you want to import something. When we import something, we have to pay the dollars. Sometimes our forex reserves may not be enough. We may not have enough dollars. So for such emergency situations, IMF provides the facility of SDR, special drawing rights. These are international reserve assets. These are the assets of RBI. So SDR is International Reserve Asset created by IMF in 1969. Why? To supplement India's official reserves, to supplement them, right? So they are not a currency. Like dollar is a currency. So you may think that SDR is also currency. No, SDR is not a currency, but it is type of currency. Like currencies have their symbol. Rupees symbol is INR. So the symbol of SDR is XDR. Okay, so it is like an artificial currency as asked by UPSC in 2010. In 2016, UPSC asked which currency is being added to this SDR. So SDR is not a currency, but is like a currency. It is made up of different currencies. Like dollars, it has 40% weightage of dollar. There is some weightage to euro, sterling, yen and yuan. In 2016, China's yuan or renminbi was included in it. So again, UPSC did not go into details that what exactly is SDR. UPSC simply asked you whether you knew which currency is being added to SDR. If you still want to understand the detailed meaning of SDR, you can refer to our last year's economy class number 9. There I have explained in detail what is SDR and how SDR supplements our official reserves in times of need. Now there was this news that India is seeking to renegotiate the tariffs at WTO. See, when we import something, let us say India is importing something, but we want to protect our domestic factories. So how do we prevent the cheap imports? Two things we can do. We can either create a non-tariff barrier. That is, we will say we will put some quota that only this much quantity of something can be imported. Or like in the case of Europe, we generally hear this in news that Europe says that when we purchase something from India, especially the agricultural products, the quality is not good, they are unsafe. Europe says that when we import some agricultural product from India, then we see that there is high amount of pesticides in it, high amount of chemicals in it, or they are not safe, they have some germs or fungus on it. So we won't allow such a thing from India. So they may say we are imposing sanitary and phytosanitary measures, therefore we won't import such things from India. There may be some similar technical barriers also in case of non-agricultural products. So these are non-tariff barriers. In case of tariff barriers, like India may say that China is selling so many cheap things to India, okay, at very less rate, and Indian factories are closing down because Indian people are dependent on imports. They are habitual of cheap imports from China, therefore they are not purchasing from Indian factories, therefore Indian factories are closing down. Or Indian government wants to promote mobile manufacturing in India, so Indian government will impose high tariffs on mobile imports. So these are tariff barriers. Now there are three important types of tariff barriers. One is safeguard duty. So Indian government wants to protect some factories in India because there are cheap imports. So to safeguard their existence, Indian government imposes some duty to protect the domestic industry. These are safeguard duty. So the purpose matters, okay? In all three cases, government is increasing your import duty. Government is increasing the duties for importing something. But the purpose differs. Purpose in safeguard duty is to protect the domestic industry. Now there can be some other reason also. For example, let us say this is China. In China there is some factory. This factory takes in lots of raw materials and let us say labor, electricity. Okay, in these input cost it keeps a profit and then it sells to India, right? Now it is possible that the Chinese government will give some subsidy to this factory, so that when Chinese government gives some subsidy to this factory, the input cost reduces. When input cost reduces, this factory will be able to sell things at a cheaper rate to India. But Indian factory is not getting any such subsidy from Indian government. So prices of Indian factory will be higher and imports will be cheaper. So people in India will buy imported goods and not from Indian factories. So therefore government says that we will impose some more duty here so that we can compensate this subsidy, right? Indian factory produces something at 100 rupees, sells something at 100 rupees. This factory also wanted to sell at 100 rupees. But Chinese government gave it a 20 rupee subsidy. So now it is selling only at 80 rupees. So Indian government will say on this import we will impose a 20 rupee countervailing duty to counter the effect of this subsidy so that our companies don't suffer. That is countervailing duty. What is anti-dumping duty? Here goods are exported at less than the domestic price. A factory in China is selling to people in China something at 100 rupees, but it is selling to people in India at 70 rupees. Why? It is dumping things here. Maybe it has surplus production, maybe it wants to capture Indian market. With these cheap imports, Indian factories, whole Indian industry will shut down. Okay, China has ulterior motives. China wants to shut down some Indian industries, so it will send so many goods to India. It will flood Indian market with cheap goods. It will dump the goods in India. Okay, dumping is done at very cheap rate, right? So Indian industry will go to Ministry of Commerce and Industry and complain. Ministry of Commerce and Industry will go to Finance Ministry, and Finance Ministry will impose anti-dumping duty so that this 70 rupees again becomes 100 rupees. Okay, China's companies are selling at a higher price to the domestic companies to their domestic market, but at cheaper rate to India. Why are they selling at cheaper rate to India? Because they want to maybe destroy the Indian factories, Indian industries. Okay, so then we will impose the anti-dumping duty. Now there is something called as bound rate. Question is, how much tariff can a country impose and on what products? So there has to be some limit under WTO system. So that upper limit is called as a bound rate. Suppose India says that on mobile phones, currently we are imposing 10% import duty, but in future maybe we will want to increase it. So we will say that on mobile phones we commit that we will impose a maximum of 25% import duty. So 25% is your bound rate. We are bound by 25% limit. However, right now we are imposing only 10%. We may increase 10%, we may decrease it, but we will keep this 10% below 25%. So 25% becomes our bound rate, right? So bound rate is a maximum tariff that a country can impose. Now, on how many items have we made this commitment? For how many items have we announced a bound rate? India has announced a bound rate only for 74% of the products that it imports, but China has announced bound rate for 100% of products. Okay, so now Indian government is trying to increase the import duties. It is trying to increase the bound rates on many products. Therefore, it is trying to renegotiate things at WTO. The question is why? Why are we trying to increase the import duties? Because we want to promote our Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan. See, a country, India, wants to protect its own factories because our consumers are consuming so much of foreign goods. So what we can do is, why we can think that why are Indian consumers preferring imports over domestic production? Indian consumers are preferring imports because imports are of good quality and they are cheaper. So we have two options to promote our factory. One option is we put some tariff and non-tariff barriers on the imports, right? Another option is that we make our factories competitive. After independence, we took this first route. We imposed import tariffs and import quotas. We said we want to protect our domestic factories, so we will not allow cheap imports. We will put restrictions here. Then people will have no choice but to purchase from Indian factory. What was the side effect? Side effect was Indian factories competed only among themselves. They did not compete with the high technology or new methods, innovative methods of foreign countries. So their competitiveness decreased. There was no competition, there was no international competition. So we became uncompetitive on the international scale. Right? So now government announced few years ago Atmanirbhar Bharat. Then again it was alleged that under Atmanirbhar Bharat we will increase the import duties. But government said no. We will not increase the import duties, rather we will make Indian factories more competitive. That is what the government said. But what is the government doing? Government is doing again the same thing of import substitution. We are increasing the import duties, like in this case. Okay. Another example, last year government put a ban on import of 101 arms imports. See, again, very important thing. Indian army wants to purchase some missiles. Suppose it will float global tenders. For this global tender, there will be tender from some other country and from, let us say, DRDO or BHEL. Now Indian companies like PSUs, DRDO, Bharat Electronics Limited, HAL, they will also apply for this tender. Army will do the field trials. In those field trials, Army will see that the reliability and quality of these imported missiles are quite good. Quality of DRDO missiles are not up to the mark. Although DRDO is supplying at a cheaper rate, but the quality is not good enough. So Army will prefer the imported products. Therefore, in this case, putting import tariffs is of no use. So therefore, government said we are putting a simple ban. Army cannot import these things because our DRDO or Bharat Electronics Limited, Bharat Heavy Electronics Limited, HAL, they are manufacturing it in India. So you please purchase from them only. Now what is this? What will happen? The competitiveness will go down. Government should have said to them that you do technology transfer. You develop new technology. You purchase technology from outside, which is available, obviously. ठीक है ना? But government did not do it. Government said you have to purchase. So DRDO and these things will again in the long term become incompetitive. So we are not learning from our history. What is TRIPS? TRIPS is trade related aspects of intellectual property rights. What are intellectual property rights? Things made from intellect, like patent, copyright, right? Trademarks, these things are part of your intellectual property rights. Now the thing is that when you're trading from one country to another, let us say from USA, in USA a company has some patent, and when it sells to India, that products come to India and Indian companies may make cheap copies of it and sell it in India. So this company will obviously make an opportunity loss. It will not get the royalties. So countries should do some minimum commitment. India should do some minimum commitment that when a foreign company sells some patented products in India, then some minimum amount of protection we will definitely provide to that company, to their patents. So that is a part of your TRIPS. It is a minimum protection that all WTO members must give to intellectual property rights of nationals of other countries, right? So basically, after Second World War, there was demand for more integration in the world, more free trade. So free trade happens when tariffs are reduced, when companies reduce their tariffs. To reduce the tariffs, we had many rounds of talks. Okay, Toroke round, Geneva round, Dillon round, so many rounds. Sometimes the rounds spread over many years. Like between 1986 and 94, we had Uruguay round. During Uruguay round, see before Uruguay round, almost all the discussions under GATT, all the discussions, all the discussions were focused on reducing the import tariffs. During Uruguay round, we said that just an agreement is not enough. Okay, in international trade, we also need to look after patents on agriculture products, on textiles. We need to have an institution. Therefore, after Uruguay round in 1995, WTO as an institution was formed. Earlier, there was just a GATT, there was just an agreement. Now we have an institution to implement it, right? And then in 2001, when we started the Doha round, then the negotiations also focused on labor standards, environment, etc. Right? So this TRIPS, protection to IPR in international trade, this came during Uruguay round, IPR protection. Okay. Now there are some something called as TRIPS plus. The minimum protection that India should provide, there are some flexibilities. In certain cases, India can kind of reduce the patent or make it more flexible, more accessible for Indian companies. India can kind of dilute the patent of this company in some cases, right? We can bypass such things. Such things are called as TRIPS flexibilities. These are allowed under the TRIPS agreement. Western countries hold most of the patents, so they always push that these TRIPS provision should be even more stricter. They should be more strict. Therefore, these countries demanding higher level of protection is called as TRIPS plus, right? Now, there are two important TRIPS flexibilities. One is parallel importing. Suppose USA, a company in USA sells a medicine within USA at 10,000 rupees. It exports to Europe at, let us say, 11,000 rupees. But when this company of USA exports to India, it sells here at, let us say, 50,000 rupees. Just an example. Okay. So what will India do? India will import it from Europe. From USA, we are legally selling it. USA company was legally selling it in a perfectly legal manner to Europe at 11,000 rupees. We will import it from Europe because it will be cheaper. So we are taking parallel imports from Europe as compared to USA. So this company of USA cannot say that I am the patent holder, I want to sell it to India at 50,000 rupees, and India is cheaply importing from Europe. That is wrong. It is my patent. So this company cannot claim such a thing. Okay, we can import it from Europe as well. So that is parallel importation, parallel importing. Another very important flexibility is compulsory licensing. Normally what happens is, when a company has made a patent, okay, it will give permission. Suppose it's a US company, it made a patent, a pharmaceutical company, okay, they gave permission to a company in India to manufacture the drugs. In return, it is asking for lots of money. ठीक है? Indian government thinks, Indian government negotiated with this company to reduce the rates. It did not. Indian company negotiated with this company to increase the production. It did not. Indian company said, please give license to more Indian companies to manufacture the goods, the medicines. It did not agree. So what Indian government will do? Indian government will say to this Indian company, you don't worry, you manufacture the medicines. He is not giving you permission. You have the formula, you please make it. Because when you do something patent, you get some patent, you disclose the things, okay, you disclose the secrets. So let us say this government, our government says to this company that you know their formula of the medicine, you manufacture it, you sell it to Indians, okay, don't worry, and from what revenue that you get, you pay something to this company, right? So this Indian government can do. It is allowed. It is allowed under Indian laws, the Indian Patent Act. It is also allowed under the TRIPS agreement, right? What was the first example? Has India ever done this? Yes. In 2012, it was for the first time in India's history that we used the provisions of compulsory licensing. We gave compulsory licensing for producing Nexavar drug to a company called as Natco. To Natco, Indian government said that you make the drug, Nexavar drug of Bayer of US. I think Bayer is a US company, I'm not sure. Okay. So government said to Natco that you produce it, and Natco pays 6% royalty. Whatever sales that Natco makes of this drug Nexavar, 6% of that goes to Bayer as royalty. Bayer did not give permission. Bayer even went to the court, but court said that government is right. It is our right, we will do this. Okay. Now important thing for your exam, that for prelims, that you must remember is that when this compulsory licensing is invoked, it is not invoked just for medicines. It can be invoked for anything. Secondly, on what grounds are you invoking this? So TRIPS allows compulsory licensing, but TRIPS does not give a list that under what conditions you can impose this. No. Okay. TRIPS give this right to the countries, to the governments. Government will decide in what situation we will give compulsory licensing. For example, right now there is pandemic. So government can say that there is pandemic, so we need to give compulsory licensing. Government can say this. In 2012 there was no pandemic, but government felt its responsibility towards the people, and government said that yes, we should give this right. There was no emergency that time, but government said no, people should have cheap medicines. Therefore government invoked this for the very first time. So a emergency is not required. Pandemic or epidemic is not required. Anytime, any country, any government can invoke this, right? Second thing, when a government invoked this, it does not mean that this person, this company has lost its patent. No, this company did not lose its patent. It still has its patent. It also has a right to be paid the compensation. Like Natco is paying 6% of its sale of Nexavar to Bayer. So it still holds a patent. It still will get the royalty. But how much royalty it will get, that the government of India will decide. Okay? What are patent pools? Suppose we want to fight some disease, and to fight that disease, to make some medicines, we need many patents, and different companies hold those different patents. So these different patent holders will give the license to manufacture the medicine in a pool. From this pool, these licenses goes to a generic medicine manufacturer, and these medicines will go to the people, and whatever is the revenue, a part of this revenue will be shared with these people. with the original patent holders. So the thing is, things will be quite cheaper. They are not demanding very high amount. They are simply saying that you take our patent, you sell it to the masses. Okay, you will earn less money. That's okay. We will take less money, but at least people will benefit. Right? That is the concept of patent pool. So Indian Patent Act, it does not really talk about patent pools. It neither prohibits nor promotes it. Right? In 2010, there was a medicine patent pool headquartered in Geneva. It is for fighting HIV, TB, and hepatitis C. So UPSC can say that to fight COVID, WHO recently formed medicine patent pool. So you will say no, medicine patent pool was formed in 2010 itself. What are Carotar rules 2020? So there is this concept of rules of origin. This is India, this is Singapore, this is China. Okay. Now suppose India and Singapore have a FTA, free trade agreement. When we import and export, we impose 0% import duty. Okay. China and Singapore also have, suppose, this FTA, they are also trading at 0% tariffs. But India is skeptical of China, so India has imposed a 20% import duty on some products from China. What Chinese company will do is they still want to sell it to India at cheap rate, so they will export things to a company in Singapore. They will export to a company in Singapore, and that company in Singapore will export to India. So this trade happened at 0%. This also trade happened at 0%. Therefore, things came from China to India via Singapore at 0% instead of 20%. When on that product we read country of import will be Singapore. But actually things came from China. So country of import is not relevant. What is relevant is country of origin. Where did those products origin? Point is, how do you determine? Because in case of globalization, that Singapore company could have sourced those products from 10 different countries and then assembled it and then sold to India. What if in this assembling process, this Singapore company imported 90% of products from China and only 10% from other countries? What if it imported only 10% from China and 90% from other countries? So there has to be some rules based on which you will find the country of origin. So those rules are specified in this Carotar. This Carotar rules are given under the Customs Act 1962. They help in determining what is the country of origin of a particular product. For example, the e-commerce sites in India must display that what is the country of origin of the product. There is a government e-marketplace portal from where government departments procure materials. There also, if a seller wants to sell something, he has to declare what is the country of origin. Okay. Now one related thing about FTA, PTA and all such things. Suppose India signs an agreement with Singapore that when we trade on some specific 10 items, we will impose 0% duty on specific 10 items. Then we will say we have a PTA with Singapore. Okay. When India and Singapore find it very beneficial and they say we are doing 0%, we will do 0% trade, we will do impose 0% tariffs on all the goods and services except some 5 items. So we are giving a negative list. Here was a positive list. Here we are giving a negative list that on these 5 items we will impose some duty, for other everything else is at 0%. Then we will call this as FTA, free trade agreement. That was PTA, white list. Negative list here is 5 items, suppose. Okay, here we are saying that we will impose 0% only on 10 items. Here we are saying we will impose 0% on all items except 5 items. That is FTA. When you say that, just a minute, when India and Singapore find this arrangement very beneficial and we say that India and Singapore should have a common external position, that is, whenever India or Singapore, any country among us, imports anything from China, we will impose the same duty while importing goods from China. Then we will say that we have formed a customs union. if we also allow the free movement of labor and capital between India and Singapore, then we will say we have formed a common market. When we also form our economic policies by coordinating with each other, then we say we have formed an economic union. And when we also consult each other for taking political decisions, we will form a political union. Okay, so for exam you should remember the chronology, that in terms of economic integration, economic union is more integrated than a FTA or a PTA. Trade in services. When we trade in goods like buying an iPhone, okay, GATT rules apply. So GATT is for trade in goods, GATS is for trade in services. It is also applicable under WTO rules. Okay, under WTO agreement, under WTO, this GATS agreement is there. It is also applicable since 1995. All countries are bound by it. This is the simple thing that UPSC can ask. Okay, if UPSC tries to make the topic of the question a bit difficult, what it will do is it will ask about the 4 modes of service export. For example, if IIT in India is giving online coaching to a student who is living in USA, then we will say there is export of only services. Only services have crossed the border. So it is mode 1. Second mode can be that the student in USA is so happy with Indian professors, he will travel to India. This student will physically travel to India and study in IIT, in this institute. So here he has traveled, so we will call it mode 2 of service export. Now Indian IITs will think that so many students are coming from USA. What we should do is we should open an office. We should open an office in USA. The work of this office will be to attract more students and send them physically to India. So presence of this office, this commercial presence, means mode 3 supply. And when IIT thinks that we should open a new branch in USA itself, our professors will travel there, then we will call it as a mode 4. Here there is movement of labor. Here there was movement of consumer. Here there is movement of supplier, of natural persons. These are the 4 modes. So UPSC can simply ask you in match the following. What are farm subsidies? Suppose Europe wants to import rice. Either USA's farmer can supply this rice or Indian farmer. From whom will Europe import? Europe will import whoever is giving at a cheaper rate. Now Indian farmer has some input cost like seeds, fertilizer, water, electricity. Similarly, US farmer also has some input cost. Both of them will keep some profit and they'll bid for Europe's tender. You know? Problem is that Indian government supplies at low price the seeds, fertilizers and water, electricity. So when the cost of Indian farmer goes down, he is able to sell it at a less price. So American farmer will complain to the US government that you also give me a subsidy so that I can also supply at a lower price. So therefore farm subsidies create international issues. Therefore there is some limitations. These subsidies given by governments to their farmers has been categorized into 3 things: green box, blue box and amber box. Suppose Indian government gives some training to farmers how to increase farm productivity. Indian government educates Indian farmer for free, or Indian government invests in research and development. These things are not distorting your trade. Under PM Kisan Yojana, Indian government gives yearly payment of 6,000 rupees to this farmer. This farmer will not become rich by these 6,000 rupees that he will start selling rice at lower price, right? 6,000 is nothing. So such kind of help are allowed without any limit, right? So Indian government can help Indian farmers in such a way without any limit. So these subsidies are called as green box subsidies. However, when Indian government supplies cheap fertilizer, electricity, seeds to the farmer, then his input cost goes down, which will distort the trade. Therefore, there is a limit here. The limit is 5% for developed countries and 10% for developing countries. Right? There is a limitation here for amber box subsidies. And what are blue box subsidies? So sometimes government may say to this farmer that the land on which you grow crops, you have been growing crops for a long time, right? And now the soil has become in a very bad quality. Therefore, to preserve the quality of the soil, please don't do farming on this soil for next 2 or 3 years, and we will pay you money for that. We will pay you money that you please don't do farming here, so that soil regains its quality. Such type of subsidy are called as blue box subsidy. They are also allowed because they don't distort the trade. Now in 2013 there was a peace clause. Now at WTO there was negotiation between different countries about how much farm subsidies are permissible. Indian government had that year brought the National Food Security Act, under which poor people get rice, wheat and coarse grains at very cheap rate, right, at 1 rupee kilo, 2 rupee kilo. Therefore, Indian government said that such subsidies, such help by Indian government to its people should not be included. Such food security programs should not be included under these limits. Okay, if our food security program breaches such limits, then no action should be taken against us. So different governments said, okay, fine, we won't take action under such cases. Let's continue with the negotiations. So that was a peace clause. So don't go into details, just understand what these things were about, what was the topic. So in 2015 UPSC asked, peace clause that appears in news is related to the affairs of WTO. Next year, same question. Amber box, blue box, green box are related to WTO affairs. See, suppose today is 2nd of June. So what you can do is, you need to integrate your studies for prelims and mains. How do you integrate your studies? To integrate your studies, when you study history, suppose you study history for 2 weeks, but you should ensure that you are studying for both prelims and mains. It is not difficult, it actually helps. Okay, when you study prelims, when you study the test series of prelims, then you actually get some very good points to mention in your mains answer, some very factual and good points, right? And when you learn facts of mains, then you are able to do better guesswork in your prelims exam. So integrated studies have to be there. So what I did was, a very good friend of mine, he last year also he studied and he cleared prelims last year. So this year again he is about to start his studies, and he asked me for a plan. He usually follows Vision IAS. Okay, so he asked me for help. What I recommended to him was that how you integrate, today's 2nd, what you do is, by 10th of June, put up a target that by 10th of June, you will complete Vision's prelims tests of 1, 2 and 9 and Vision's mains test of 1 and 9. Polity and society. Okay, this you will study for these weeks. Again, you continue studying polity and society, and by 17th of June, you complete more tests. Prelims test 10, 11, 31 and mains tests 10, 7 and 18. So what will happen in this way is that by 17th of June, my friend would have completed his polity and society, both the prelims tests and the mains test. Basics you already know. Okay, when you know the basics, you can jump to your test series. So he will be jumping to the test series, and this way his syllabus will get completed. Next, for 2 weeks he will study history. So these are coordinated tests of history only, right? Next 2 weeks he will study ethics. When he will be studying for the ethics mains tests, he will be studying the full length test of prelims. Ultimately, when you don't understand any concept of prelims test also, you can always rectify it. There are many facts to be rectified. Okay, so that's nothing wrong in it. Then he will study for security. Now when I have given these deadlines, suppose security science and tech deadline is of June 22nd. So this does not mean that on Thursday itself he is going to attempt all these tests. What I mean to say is that from 16 July to 22nd July, continuously he will study these things, and he may do these tests any day. On 16th itself, he may complete test number 23 of prelims. Point is, by this date, he should have completed these tests. Okay, so in this integrated manner, by the end of August, my friend would have completed his GS, prelims as well as mains. And in the month of September, he can revise the things dedicatedly for your prelims exam. right? Side by side, every week he will study optional. By every Saturday, he will have to complete his syllabus for one optional test. Okay, in this way, by end of August, he would have completed his optional syllabus also by studying every week for one test. Daily he will study for optional 1 or 2 hours, and every week he will complete one test. Okay, that is what I have made for him, the plan I made for him. So I thought I can share it with you also, in case anyone is working without any plan. Okay, one important thing, suppose you are not able to finish your polity and society by this date. So usually we have a tendency that for 2 more days let me study this. Please don't make that mistake. Suppose you covered only 70% of your polity and society target. Please leave 30%. Please leave it and start with your history. To ensure this complete coverage, you will miss on your history and ethics and security. Okay, there is nothing like complete or 100% studies. Okay, set some target, try to achieve maximum of it within a limited time, and then jump to other subjects also. Fine. Clarification regarding our paid courses. So like economy, first class was totally free on YouTube. Second class we gave around 50 minutes class free on YouTube, and the rest 3 hours was paid. Now economy third class, this is third class free part, and the paid part is a part of our paid course, right? So if you pay 200 rupees or for Hindi and 250 rupees for English videos, so what you will get is you will get all these videos of economy current affairs. You pay 250 rupees, you will get all these paid portion. After fourth class of economy, we would have completed our economy current affairs. After 2 or 3 months, I think after 2 months, we will release a updated material book. For that also we will have 2 classes. So those are also included in this paid portion only, right? Similarly, for environment, there will be some free part and some paid part. So for the entire paid part of environment, you will again have to pay 250 rupees. Similarly for science and tech, again 250 rupees. Right, so I don't think it's a big amount. For 250 rupees you are getting also many videos, right? And PDF is free for everyone. Okay, don't worry about the PDF.